My flight tracking app just told me my flight had landed. I'm still on it. Window seat, 14B, seatbelt sign on. A flight attendant walking past me right now with the drink cart. According to every airline system on the ground, I landed 11 minutes ago, at gate 12, on time. I stared at the notification for a long moment before I even reacted to it, half expecting the app to correct itself the way apps sometimes do, catching up to reality a few seconds late. It didn't correct itself. Landed 11 minutes ago, gate 12, sitting right there under my flight number in the same clean font the app uses for every real update. No warning label, no glitch icon, nothing to suggest the system itself thought anything was wrong. I looked out the window, clouds below us, endless and white, the ocean somewhere further down than I could actually see. No runway, no gate, no airport anywhere near enough for the word landed to make any sense at all. The wing sat exactly where it always sits, the engine humming its same steady note. Everything about the physical world around me insisting we were still hours from anywhere. I texted my mother, who I knew was already at the terminal waiting to pick me up. Still in the air, I typed. Don't worry about the tracker. It's glitching. She replied faster than I expected her to. Faster than a person usually types when they're only half paying attention to their phone. I know, she wrote. That's why I'm confused. The board says you landed 11 minutes ago. I read that sentence 3 times before I let myself understand it fully. She wasn't arguing with me. She wasn't taking the board's side over mine. She was standing right there in the terminal, looking at the exact same impossible fact I was looking at from a completely different angle, equally unsure which version of the truth to trust. She sent a photo a minute later, taken on her phone, aimed at the actual arrivals board hanging above baggage claim. My flight number, landed, gate 12, green text, the same shade every other confirmed arrival used on that board. Nothing about it visually distinguishing it as wrong from any of the ordinary flights listed above and below it. I zoomed in on my end, the way you do when a picture doesn't make sense, and some part of you thinks getting closer will fix that. The timestamp beside it matched the app exactly. Landed 11 minutes ago. Not an estimate. Not a delay notice. A completed fact, printed in confident block letters above a crowd of people who had apparently already walked off my plane and moved on with their evening without me. She sent a second photo before I could reply to the first. This one aimed at the actual crowd near baggage claim instead of the board itself. Ordinary travelers, rolling suitcases, a woman adjusting a child's backpack strap, someone checking their phone the exact way I was checking mine right now. Thousands of miles away from where she stood in that terminal. Nothing about any of them should have meant anything to me at all. Except one detail sat wrong in my stomach before I could even name it properly. A gray jacket near the edge of the frame, the same faded gray as the one folded over the tray table of the man beside me in seat 14C. The same slouch to the shoulders as him right now, asleep with his head against the window and one earbud still in. I looked over at him. He was still there, jacket still folded exactly where he'd left it, chest rising and falling in the slow rhythm of someone genuinely asleep, unaware of any of this. I looked back at the photo. The jacket in the crowd was already walking away, toward the exit, too far from the camera now to make out a face, moving with the unhurried certainty of someone who already knows exactly where they're going and has no reason left to look back. I unbuckled despite the seatbelt sign and caught the flight attendant on her next pass down the aisle, keeping my voice low enough not to wake the man beside me, my heart beating harder than the situation should have justified yet. I told her what the app said, what my mother had sent. She listened with the patient expression of someone who has heard 100 passenger complaints about tracking glitches and expects this to be the 101st, nodding along at the right moments without much urgency behind any of it. She said tracking data doesn't always sync correctly, that sometimes the app pulls an old status update from the ground before anything's actually confirmed, and that it usually fixes itself before landing. Nothing about the way she said it sounded rehearsed exactly, but nothing about it sounded curious either. The kind of answer people give when they've decided in advance not to think too hard about the question. I asked how much flight time we actually had left. She checked the tablet clipped to her belt without much urgency and said just over 3 hours, same as the departure briefing had promised. Nothing unusual about the number at all. Delivered with the same easy confidence as everything else she'd already told me. I almost let that reassure me completely. Then I noticed, only for a second before she turned the tablet away, that the screen behind her thumb showed a seating chart with my row already marked empty. Not boarding, not in progress. Empty. The pale gray color the chart uses after everyone has already stood up and gone. The same shade it would only ever show once a flight had fully, officially ended. She caught me looking and angled the tablet flat against her hip before I could ask about it directly. Said she'd flagged the tracking issue to ground crew once we landed and moved on down the aisle without waiting for me to say anything else in response, leaving me sitting there with the question still half formed in my throat. I sat back down, unsettled in a way I couldn't fully explain yet, and pulled up the seatback entertainment screen out of habit, tapping through to the little animated flight map everyone half watches during long flights without really thinking about it. The plane icon sat directly over the destination airport, not approaching it. On it, parked at a gate, the little animation frozen mid-pulse the way it does once a flight officially ends. The progress bar beneath it completely filled in, 100%, nothing left for it to track. I looked out the actual window at the actual sky. Clouds, endless, unmoving. The wing exactly where it's supposed to be. Engine humming steady and low beneath the ordinary cabin noise around me. Nothing outside matched anything the little icon was claiming. I tapped the map once, hoping a refresh might fix it. It reloaded, and the icon appeared at the gate again. Arrival confirmed, in the exact same tone it uses at the actual end of every actual flight I've ever taken in my life. I didn't try a second time. Some part of me already understood the screen wasn't going to give me a different answer no matter how many times I asked it the same question. I got up and walked to the back galley instead, on legs that felt shakier than sitting too long could really explain, needing to see something with my own eyes that wasn't a screen for even a minute. The galley was ordinary, cramped, smelling faintly of reheated coffee. A second attendant folding blankets who glanced up at me and asked, politely, if everything was okay, in a tone that made it fairly clear she could already tell it probably wasn't, before I'd said a single word. Back in my seat, I opened the photo my mother had sent again, staring at the gray jacket walking away from the camera, and then looked at the man beside me, still asleep. His own gray jacket still folded exactly where he'd left it on his lap the entire time. I woke him gently, apologized for it immediately, and showed him the photo anyway, needing a second pair of eyes more than I needed to be polite about interrupting his sleep. He blinked at the screen for a long moment, still half caught in whatever dream he'd been pulled out of, before his expression changed into something I didn't like seeing at all. He said that's his jacket, not similar. His, a small tear near the left pocket, mended with thread that doesn't quite match the fabric, visible even at that distance in the photo if you already knew exactly where to look for it, which he clearly, immediately did without hesitating once, his finger tapping the exact spot on my screen. He said he'd flown this exact route so many times he could recognize his own jacket in a blurry photo without needing to think twice about it, and that the tear had been there for 2 years, since a trip he specifically remembered because of a spilled coffee and an unusually angry gate agent that particular day. I asked if he had a twin, a brother, anyone at all who might reasonably be walking through that terminal, wearing an identical jacket with an identical tear in the exact same spot. He said no, flatly, in a tone that wasn't defensive so much as tired. The specific tone of someone who has already tried on every reasonable explanation available to him and found that none of them actually fit the shape of what he'd just seen with his own eyes. He got quiet after that, staring out the window instead of at his phone, and I let the silence sit between us for a while before I finally asked if this had ever happened to him before, on some earlier flight he could remember. He said not exactly like this. Then, after a pause long enough that I genuinely thought he might not finish the sentence at all, He said he always requests this exact seat, 14C. Not for the legroom, not for the aisle, just habit. The kind of habit you don't examine closely until someone asks you to explain it out loud, and you suddenly realize you actually can't come up with a real reason at all. He said he'd had this same flight number feel wrong before, more than once. A sense of having already landed somewhere in the middle of the trip that he'd always blamed on exhaustion or bad sleep. Right up until the next time he was back in this seat, and it started feeling wrong again from the first hour onward. I reached into the seat pocket for my own boarding pass, mostly just to have something solid in my hands, and looked down at it without really expecting to see anything new. Seat 14C, not 14B. I know what I booked. I know where I've been sitting since we boarded. The window on my right the entire flight, exactly where 14B should put me. The pass in my hand said 14C anyway, printed clean, no smudge, no sign it had ever said anything else. I looked at his pass without asking this time, just reached over and turned it toward the light. 14C, same seat, same printed letters. 2 boarding passes, 2 different names, 1 seat number. Both of us sitting exactly where we'd been sitting the entire time. Neither of us in the place either pass now claimed we were. Neither of us said anything for a while after that. I kept turning my own pass over in my hands anyway, half hoping to find some printing error on the back that would explain any of it. There wasn't one, just the airline's logo, and nothing else left to argue with. The seatbelt sign chimed on without any announcement to explain it, and a moment later the cabin lights flickered, once, then again, longer the second time, long enough that the man beside me grabbed the armrest between us, without seeming to notice he'd even done it. In the half second the lights were out, I looked instinctively toward the window, the way you do when something changes, and your body wants information faster than your mind can actually process it. Below us, where there should have been nothing but ocean and cloud for hours in every direction, a grid of lights sat spread out across the dark, unmistakably a runway, unmistakably an airport, close enough to make out individual lights along the edges of what looked like a taxiway, curling off toward a distant terminal building. The cabin lights came back on. I looked again immediately, my whole body leaning toward the window glass, palm flat against it. Clouds, ocean somewhere beneath them, the same endless white we'd been flying over for hours straight. No runway, no airport, nothing at all like what I'd just seen for that one dark second the flickering lights had given us a glimpse of. I asked the man beside me if he'd seen it too, my voice quieter than I meant it to come out. He nodded slowly, still gripping the armrest hard enough that his knuckles had gone pale, and said he had, and that this was exactly the part he'd never been able to explain to anyone who asked him about it, because by the time the lights came back on, there was never anything left outside to actually point at, not once, not in all the times it had happened to him before. I opened my email on my phone, needing to do something with my hands more than I needed any real plan, and scrolled back through old flight confirmations out of nervous habit, my thumb moving faster than my thoughts could keep up with. I found the confirmation for this exact flight, this exact date, this exact seat, everything matching what I already knew to be true. Then, beneath it, a second confirmation I didn't remember ever receiving. Same flight number, same date, time-stamped for a departure that would have been 3 hours after this flight had already, officially, landed according to the app on my screen. I opened it. A boarding pass, my name spelled correctly, seat 14C again, the same number now sitting on both of our passes, status already marked used, a small barcode at the bottom that scanned, according to the airline's own verification page when I checked it with hands that had started shaking slightly by then, as boarded and checked in already. I hadn't booked a second flight. I hadn't checked in twice, not on purpose, not by accident, not in any way I could account for no matter how far back I tried to trace it. According to the airline, I was somehow already scheduled to board this exact plane again, in this exact seat, the same seat that seemed to keep insisting it belonged to whoever was asking about it hardest. I showed the man beside me. He looked at it for a long time without saying anything at all, then quietly asked if the return time listed matched anything he recognized personally from his own past confirmations. I turned the screen toward him properly. He went pale in a way I hadn't seen from him yet the entire flight, and said that was the exact same flight he always seems to end up rebooking, without ever remembering why he'd done it in the first place. In the one seat he never actually chose so much as kept losing to someone else. The captain's voice came over the speaker, calm and practiced, saying we were beginning our final descent, thanking us for flying with the airline. The same script every pilot uses on every ordinary flight I've ever been on in my entire life, without a single word out of place. The same flight attendant from earlier walked past a few minutes later, checking seatbelts row by row, and stopped briefly at ours to glance at the buckle. I asked her, carefully, if she remembered our earlier conversation about the tracking app and the empty seating chart on her tablet. She looked at me with polite, blank confusion, the specific kind that isn't performance, and said this was actually the first time she'd spoken to me at all on this flight. I described the tablet, the empty seating chart, everything she'd told me about the tracking data. She said, still pleasant, still entirely professional, that none of that sounded like anything she would have said to a passenger, and gently reminded me to make sure my seatbelt was fastened properly for landing before moving on. I looked at the man beside me instead of answering her back. He hadn't looked away from the window since the captain's announcement had started, watching the clouds with the specific kind of stillness of someone bracing for something he already fully expects to happen, and has simply, finally, decided not to fight anymore this time around. I asked him, quietly, if he was going to be okay once we landed. He didn't answer right away. When he finally did, he just said he didn't know anymore, and went back to watching the window, leaving it at that for the rest of the descent. We landed normally, wheels down, a small bump, the ordinary scattered applause from a few passengers near the back, the seatbelt sign chiming off exactly the way it's supposed to on any unremarkable, forgettable flight like 1,000 others. I walked off the jet bridge into the terminal, scanning the crowd for my mother, and found her standing exactly where she said she'd be, phone still in her hand, the arrivals board visible on the wall behind her shoulder, glowing the same green as always, my flight number. Landed. The timestamp beneath it still read 11 minutes ago, the exact same gap it had shown hours earlier, over the ocean, before any of this had actually happened yet by any clock I could reasonably point to and trust. I looked back toward the gate we'd just come from. The man in the gray jacket was already walking away from it, toward the exit, his back to me, too far ahead now for me to call out to before he disappeared fully into the crowd, though I never once actually saw him leave his own seat behind me on the plane. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. A new email. Boarding confirmed. Seat 14C. Departure in 10 minutes.